Welcome to People Are the Point. I'm your host, Mark Concannon. Let's talk about the people. I'm your host, Mark Concannon, for the podcast People Are the Point. Today, I'll have Ali Zamiri joining me. Ali is currently responsible for XR developer relations and ecosystem development for Snapdragon Spaces at Qualcomm. As a world leader in specialized chip technology, Qualcomm is a key player in the extended reality space, and Ali is helping bring a new marketplace to life for the entrepreneur. As a world leader in specialized chip technology, Qualcomm is a key player in the extended reality space, and Ali is helping bring a new marketplace to life for the enterprise environment. Ali is also a single father raising a son to whom he dedicates great effort, working to be a role model not just in his career, but in his parenting and friendships. Ali gives genuine energy towards relationship, looking to not just help people with business problems, but to truly help people. As I venture down this podcast path looking to highlight the importance of people in business, I could think of no one better than Ali to talk about his approach to exactly this question. What is the role of people in business, and how to make connection when business is so focused on nothing but outcomes? Ali, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You're down in San Diego today?
Yes, I'm actually in our headquarters here in San Diego, California.
A beautiful city. I always miss it. I feel like those of you that still live there, I hope you don't take it for granted.
Being from Michigan, I definitely don't.
What brought you down to San Diego in the first place then, moving you from Michigan?
You know, my father decided many years ago when he was retiring to relocate to San Diego from the Detroit area. And he said, if you want to see me, I suggest you come and live down there. So I was lucky enough to find a job with Qualcomm way back then and been here ever since.
That's great. Yeah, so you're currently at Qualcomm and you're managing relationships related to virtual reality. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because I attended University of Michigan, studied Japanese. Upon graduation, moved to Japan, and then and with a non-technical background, and I was able to join Qualcomm as a non-engineer, doing interesting things throughout my career here at the company. My current role is doing partnerships for enterprise developers using XR technology, so virtual reality, augmented reality in the workplace. So, and that could apply to any vertical: education, healthcare, manufacturing, etc.
And as you've taken your background, as you said, so many different roles you've had before, I know that you've had periods of your career where you're focused on sales. Now it's obviously more relationships with developers.
Yeah.
What has been something that's a common thread for you that you've enjoyed across those
That's
challenges?
a great question, Mark. I think ultimately people do business with people they like. And I've discovered that time and time again. And it doesn't only apply to the United States, of course, it's a global phenomena. I think it more so in countries like Japan, where I lived for 6 years, where there's a lot more hand-holding in the process, but a lot less in the way of written contracts. Once you've established that relationship with that person, it's more of a handshake type of relationship, and you trust them. And that's how it works there. I think America has a lot of that as well, still, despite the fact that we've become a little bit more litigious. But fact is, people still want to do business with people they like, and they can build that bond through a variety of ways of building that relationship, whether it's dining, golf, what have you.
So the interpersonal relationships and building those, it's something you enjoy.
It's internal as well. Yeah, I really enjoy it internally. It's like people come to me in the office and say, Ali, who do I talk to in marketing to get this done, or in legal, or in finance, or in engineering, or in product? I mean, I could go on and on. But after being here a number of years, you build up those relationships and that tribal knowledge to get things done. And I think that serves me well. Also, not only internally, but with our customers that I deal with on a daily basis.
I think you just brought up a really good point. I just got off a conversation with a friend from Verizon, a similar conversation of, hey, we might be a big organization, but it's still a lot of who you know is how you get things done.
I would say their corporate culture is very much that way, and it's effective. And because we're in San Diego, it's a little bit different than a typical Silicon Valley company. in that there are not many other technology companies in the area. And so what happened is Qualcomm is sort of, if you will, the mothership that spawned all these amazing wireless companies from it. And so people who have left, they still remain in touch with the mothership, if you will, at their new ventures. So it
That
served them well.
interconnectivity. Yeah, that's great. Well, talk a little about Snapdragon Spaces, because that's a piece of the focus, right, of what you're taking on right now.
Yeah. So basically, Qualcomm is the leader on the hardware side. So we develop chips for the Meta Quest, the Pico devices, basically all of the XR devices you can think of, the headset devices, except for, I would say, the Apple Vision Pro, which is getting a lot of publicity these days. But really, Qualcomm's established this dominance, I'd say 90% plus market share in the XR headset space for the hardware side. On the software side, they've also developed this technology called Snapdragon Spaces, which is basically using perception algorithms. It's an SDK that allows developers to quickly develop their application for head-worn devices using Qualcomm chips. And so my job, because we're seeing a lot of traction in the enterprise space, my job is to build these partnerships with these developers that can quickly get their products, their services to market as fast as possible using the Spaces platform.
Well, and Qualcomm was one of the first to have an app store back when, phones, before smartphones were even a thing, correct?
Yes, it was called Brew, or otherwise known as Binary Runtime Environment for Wireless.
That's great.
So and I actually worked on that group as well.
Come full circle, taking a proven model and then taking a new approach to it. That makes sense. Well, so you're there in San Diego, good challenges in the work environment. You're also a father. How do you balance some of the challenges of making sure your son's getting what he needs, your time with him, and the work demands?
Yeah, well, he's a typical 15-year-old teenager grown up in Southern California which is obviously very, very different than growing up in Michigan or the Midwest. The nice weather, the lack of interest in really studying, but the great thing is, yes, it's a challenge being a single father. Nice thing is that his mother lives nearby, and also that we have our whole family here, my parents, my sisters, and it's really true what they say, it takes a village. So he gets a lot of that growth, support. He learns a lot from other family members, and he always feels like he's part of this family. So it's worked out well. It's never easy, as you can imagine. You are juggling all the time, especially a teenager, and he's getting ready to take driver's ed. So that's going to be a whole new series of challenges. But one of the nice things is, because I work for a global company, and Qualcomm is great with, the work-life balance, that I have time for him. We have a lot of customers from all over the world. When I say all over the world, I mean like Africa, Middle East, obviously Asia, Europe. And when they come to visit, on many occasions, I've introduced my son to some of these executives that have come, if it's more of a social setting outside of work. And it's great for him to be exposed to that, to realize that there's more beyond just life in SoCal, that the world, we are all interconnected, if you will. And I think that's going to serve him well later on in his life.
Well, that perspective, and like we said earlier, not taking SoCal for granted. It is very fortunate to be part of that.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, that's great. I know my daughter turns 11 this month, and to your point, juggling all of that is never easy.
No, and I remember when he was 11, there were different challenges, and I think I keep thinking when he's 18, it's going to be done. He's off to college. There's probably going to be new challenges. I think I'm still a challenge for my parents.
Yes. So. Are we ever not? Yes. It's the old saying about once a parent, always a parent, no matter how old your child is.
100%.
Very true. So as you think about the teams you work with there at Qualcomm, what is it that you enjoy about the people that you work with and the customers that you serve and the partners, I guess, really, that you're bringing in? What part of the personal interactions is that you enjoy the most?
Well, I think the number one thing that's helped me be somewhat successful, if you will, is really trying to understand our customer needs, but also from a cultural point of view. What's that expression? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it really resonates with me because it's so true, especially when I'm dealing with the Japanese, where sometimes the logical or the right thing to do is not necessarily the best course of action in dealing with our Japanese customers, if you will. But that can apply even to the United States. So um, so understanding their needs, understanding how I can support them. It's always a constant. What else could I be doing for them? Because, we're appreciative. They have other technology choices they could make. So coming to Qualcomm is an honor, even though many say we're the 800-pound gorilla in the wireless space or the connectivity space. We're still, this industry, especially the extended reality industry, is still very early days. And thank you to the folks at Apple, the Vision Pro, for getting a lot of attention for this space. We're seeing a lot more traction. I mean, I just saw just a day or two ago, surgeons used the Apple Vision Pro in conducting some sort of operation. And that was really cool to me because that shows that, okay, other people will see that it got the right publicity and we'll see even more interest and traction.
No, that is exciting. I agree. And that's, on the one hand, we've got Apple coming into the marketplace, really a first generation product, almost a proof of concept at some level, the price point and the functionality, but they're definitely going to iterate and evolve quickly. On the flip side, of course, we saw Sony discontinue production of the headset for the PlayStation, but I think that's more of a reflection that there's, on the gaming front, it hasn't had the demand. I think you're right, the focus on enterprise.
That's correct. I don't know if you saw the announcement at CES in January. Sony announced a new enterprise-specific head-worn device. So yes, they're still very much bullish in the space, as is you've seen other announcements from other big players like Samsung's of this world. So yeah, we're very bullish. The business has been growing steadily every year. And we just see it at trade shows. Like I went to XR Kaigi in Tokyo 2 years ago. And then a year later, I went again and I actually had the opportunity to speak at the show. They took up double the space, double the number of attendees, and double the number of exhibitors. So there's no doubt that there is interest in this space, in spatial computing, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure you're aware of the Cornerstone acquisition for Tailspin, another friend of ours in the marketplace, a partner of my organization. A lot of excitement there for what's possible. Now they're part of this very large organization with, established customer base and proven success. What are your thoughts there on Tailspin becoming part of that and Qualcomm's partnership there?
Yeah, they're a close partner early on the Spaces front. They have developed on the Spaces platform. And the nice thing about developing on Spaces is that it's basically a write once and run on many devices. So there's not going to be a lot of work for them to port on other devices. Our first device being the Lenovo VRX, which is a virtual reality or mixed reality device. And then beyond that, other devices will be coming out, like I mentioned, like the Sony device, for example. But the nice thing about the announcement there is that it also gives a lot more credibility to XR being used in the education and training side, which is where we're seeing a lot of interest, both in not only in education in K through 12 and higher education, but also in corporate environments for hard skills and soft skills type of training.
Yeah, I think that's what's always interesting to me is I know PwC back maybe 7-8 years ago issued a paper. They did a study on the efficacy of virtual reality as a training mode and how impactful it is, both in retention and time to train. And that I found out they did that to decide whether or not they should move into the space. And it was so compelling that they've been pursuing this as a path ever since. So I think and that's only gotten better, right? The technology just keeps getting better.
I mean, it's so two examples. One, I'm actually on the board of a nonprofit where we're using XR technology in classrooms in developing markets to help educate kids. And then we're actually comparing that with a classroom for the same type of curriculum, not using the XR technology. And the retention is just so much higher in an XR type of environment. Primarily, I think because there's no distractions and the experience is gamified, if you will, in some ways. Like learning a language could be gamified, making it fun for the kid to want to learn instead of just memorizing. So that's one example.
Yeah, no distractions thing's huge.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
And then on the flip side, for education, like a lot of these quick service restaurants, like the McDonald's of the world. They're interested in using XR technology to help train younger employees, which might feel more comfortable. That 17 to 25-year-old segment that wants to get trained, but doesn't necessarily want to listen to someone train them. They put the headset on and it prepares them for that first day on the job. And they've gamified the experience. So it teaches them how to bag during rush hour versus slower hours, teaches them how to make a milkshake the right way, for example. And it also, in the process, is saving those companies a ton of money in waste, because there's so much food waste in this industry. And if they could save on that cost alone, it's a big win-win. The investment expense is minimal.
Yeah, I remember I actually had a job at McDonald's years and years ago when I was high school. And I remember being sat in a room and shown a video, and just what you retain compared to, on-the-job training, which is what it's recreating in the virtual world. You basically are getting on the job without the risk and without the time in front of the customer being taken away.
Also teaches them how to communicate with customers. Because what happens is they found that a lot of these quick service restaurants have found people quit within 3 days. But if they get the VR training, they'll actually stay on way longer because they're prepared for the onslaught and how people are talking, because they get that proper training.
Yeah. So higher retention of the knowledge and higher retention of the employee as a result.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. Well, you mentioned language, and you mentioned you lived in Japan for a while, fluent in Japanese. Have you retained that language skill?
Yeah, to Qualcomm's credit, if you have a skill and you say, hey, listen, I want to work, and there's an opportunity, and you speak up, they'll allow you to work on it. So every role I've had at Qualcomm has involved some sort of touch point with the Japanese market. And it's not just the language. Yes, I have retained it. I can order in sushi restaurants, but beyond that, it's more about just this complete understanding of the situation. My fluency is definitely not there anymore, but if you put me in a situation in a meeting, a lot of times I've noticed that my colleagues who don't have a lot of exposure with the Japanese, they misunderstand what the other side is saying, even though they're speaking English. It's because the way Japanese do it, they'll translate in their head, and I know what they're trying to say, so I'll actually regurgitate it, but in a way that's understandable for my colleagues. Plus, I also sometimes have to kick my colleagues under the table not to finish the other side's sentences, because of course they speak slower. It's not their native tongue. So there's a lot of those little things. I mean, I had a boss that told me, please, let me know when I'm talking too much. And so it was funny because he had bruises on his shins by the end of the meeting.
Well, I think that reminds me, I've also had a lot of experience working internationally, and often with Zoom calls or video calls. A key lesson learned was always you have to talk and pause, because it doesn't mean that the language is, not even language, but the communication is getting across at the same speed you would in a room together. And as you probably know, I talk quickly. So taking that moment to pause in real life too, even in person with the multilingual is so key.
100. Japanese are comfortable with silences in conversation. I've noticed, like, a typical American conversation is back and forth. In the Japanese, one guy talks and the other guy just nods, says yes, got you, yes, basically just showing that he's listening. And that one person will talk for like 2 minutes straight, 3 minutes, and then he'll stop, and then the other guy, and that's their way of communicating properly.
Yeah, those cultural differences and respecting them, and then being open to accommodating. Yeah, so important.
And another thing is, it's interesting because when you deal with a Japanese company, for example, and I'm seeing this more in America, but it's still not quite there, where once you have dinner, you have drinks, you've done some sort of like golf or some sort of outing like that, and you've built the relationship in a social way outside of work, the Japanese come in to trust you, and you've built that relationship where things are a lot easier to communicate key points of interest or maybe even differences. That is still not the case here. You can dine and with a person, and then next day there'll be a complete misunderstanding and people won't talk anymore, or they might be upset with each other instead of giving the benefit of the doubt to the other person. So having that whining and dining was basically useless in the US.
So you feel like,
and I've seen that a few times.
And you feel like that's a new development? Like I feel like if you go back 20 years ago in my early consulting career, the wining and dining was absolutely a prerequisite to successful integration between, for us, consultancies into an organization we're servicing. And to your point, we would be able to recover from missteps better together because of those dinners. You're saying that isn't as true anymore.
Well, it's not, and I think this kind of Zoom culture might be hurting that aspect of it. You know what I mean? So because you'd come out and visit someone and you would settle things face to face. Now, sometimes it's not so easy to settle things by Zoom.
Yeah, no, I agree. The interpersonal connection's lost.
Yeah, and the body language as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So your Japanese skills, is that something you passed on to your son as he picked up a multilingual background?
No, he did not get my. Look, I don't have talent for many things in life. I have a decent backhand in tennis, and I can speak languages, and that's about it. My son has math skills. He's good at math, and I don't have that. And I'm actually, frankly, jealous, but he doesn't have language skills, and he's not doing well in Spanish. But anyway, look, you can't have everything. You just wanted to be a contributing member of society and stay healthy. And
yeah, that's always very important. So as you look at the different roles you've had of your career, what's one of the major skills you feel like you have that's helped you with those interpersonal relationships?
Reading the other person. Yeah. I think also having some self-awareness. Yeah. Ultimately, you have to have an interest in people. So that's why I always have an external facing role at Qualcomm. I didn't become a physician like my father because I did not want to be stuck in a clinic all day. I really enjoyed the exposure with the outside world. And so I think just caring about the other person. I read a book many, many years ago that kind of solidified it for me called Mr. Schmooze. And it actually painted schmoozing in a positive light. And I highly recommend the book. It was very, very thin, one of those like told in a story format, but for some reason it resonated with me. And so I kind of try to emulate what he's done. And it basically means trying to figure out the other person's needs without them asking for it even.
That's good. So it's listening, interpreting them, and then knowing yourself.
And then even predicting. And I try to do this with my boss as well. Like, what is it that he would want? And look, I don't always get it right. I sometimes do overkill, but it's appreciated at least.
Yeah, the work to anticipate the needs. That's always a key part of it. It makes sense. So if there was one thing you kind of want to share with people about building the relationships, so you mentioned listening and knowing yourself, but for development of those skills, what maybe recommendation you'd have for folks to be better at listening and knowing themselves?
Well, it's funny. I listen to other podcasts. I listen to tennis podcasts because I'm a big tennis fan.
That's your backhand.
And I feel like tennis is sometimes like a metaphor for life, because it's a combination of physical and mental, and a lot of it is actually mental because most of the top players all have the tools to win, but only there's a very few that actually keep winning, and it's because of the mental side. I also listen to a lot of podcasts in business, strategy, technology, and history, and that's helped a lot. And then I think just not being afraid to throw yourself out there and volunteer for cool projects that come your way. Again, that's helped because also showing up is really what I keep telling my son. Just go to practice. I know you don't want to. Go to this play, for example. Show up in life. Show up for the chess club because I know he's really good in chess. And some days he doesn't want to, but he's always glad he did. Goes for me. We don't have to come to work every day at Qualcomm. We have sort of a hybrid approach. I come in every day because so many things happen when you're at the office. And that's what our CEO wants us to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it. But by coming in, I'll see, oh, this is happening. Oh, this customer's here. Can I join that meeting? And guess what? It turns out to be an amazing meeting, which then leads to other things. So
developing those interpersonal relationships for the who gets things done. It's exactly along those lines. That makes sense.
Yeah. So if I had one advice, it is, show up.
Show up.
Things happen.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, thank you, Ali, for the time today. I really appreciate you being part of this.
Mark, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend. You look great.
Same.